Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Keeping with the tradition of the daily spoilers, April 6 spoilers this time, and there is some goodies. I have actually looked through them. So I broke my own tradition and did look through these particular spoilers and love them. This is going to be a pretty good set. I think that this is going to impact more of the older formats rather than the formats, the standard format. I still think Kaladesh is by far a lot more powerful than the cards we've seen come out of Amonkhet. But for Modern, Frontier, even possibly, well, EDH, Commander, possibly even Legacy, there's some good ones today. So let's just jump right into the spoilers. The first one is the Hazoret's Favor. It's 3 mana at the beginning of your combat on your turn. You may have target creature get +2/+0 in haste, and then you have to sacrifice at the beginning of next end step. So it's not that bad though, because that is a pretty powerful ability. That's the Battle Driver, Ogre Battle Driver ability. And if you've ever used that sort of card before, Ogre Battle Driver, you know how fast it can get out of hand. The only problem though is that gave all creatures +2/+0. This only gives 1. But if it does have Double Strike, for example, think the Electrostatic Pummeler here, or another card that can get pumped up very, very highly. It needs haste, wants haste. The additional +2/+0 can swing in for a ton of damage. So I think it's pretty cool of a card. It can be a trap though, for sure. I mean, it is a May ability though, so keep that in mind. It also might get some value with cards that want to die, or cards that want to be exerted, and then you don't care. I mean, they're just one-trick ponies, like one-time use type cards, and it's definitely gonna have some combinations I think that are worthwhile in both limited and in standard. 3 mana is a little bit tough, a little bit high for a card like this for this ability. I think you'd want to start getting value out of it by turn 3 or turn 4. I guess you can get value on a turn 3 though. You drop it on turn 3 and then your 2-drop becomes bigger. The haste isn't relevant at that point, but I don't know, it's a fine card. It's definitely interesting enough to try to brew around it for sure. Then this next one though, the Soulscar Mage, is pretty phenomenal because we know how powerful prowess 1/2 creatures can be. Just think of the good old Monastery Swift Spear, which is also a 1/2 prowess for 1 mana. It does have haste, but that's the end of the ability there. This Soulscar Mage does not have haste. However, if the source you control would deal non-combat damage to a creature an opponent controls, you put that many -1/-1 counters on that creature instead. That is pretty big. So Lightning Bolts become permanent now. So Lightning Bolt's actually decent versus like a Tarmogoyf. So if Tarmogoyf happens to be a 4/5, you can at least nerf it down to a 1/2. And then say cards that are pumped up for a particular turn, you can still hit them. And then as soon as the pump ability goes away, then they'll get the -1/-1. The -1/-1s will still read, and then they will of course die. So I think this is a pretty powerful card. Red aggro does need a little bit of help. I mean, it's that red-black aggro is starting to have a lot more. People are starting to play it again because it's still one of those decks that can outrace the Saheeli combo. And this is going to be perfect. They are in desperate need of a 1-drop that doesn't rely so much on artifacts. The prowess is nice with this because in Licensed Disintegration still wants artifacts, but you can still get the prowess trigger off of many other cards besides just instants or sorceries. So enchantments, planeswalkers, and even non-creature artifacts will trigger off the prowess. And 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, very easy to do in a single match. I think this is another card that could easily go in a kind of a red-green energy type pump strategy because it's really easy to give this double strike and do enough. There's a lot of other non-combat sources of damage. So think of the Chandra, the Chandra, both Chandras that are currently in standard, the big Chandra and the medium-sized Chandra, the one that does 3 damage or X damage to all creatures. This now puts the -1/-1 counters on them permanently, and we know that -1/-1 counters matter to trigger off other things. So this gets out of hand for those Kozilek returns, those the Radiant Flames, the Chandras that do damage to all creatures. So yeah, pretty phenomenal card, Soulscar Mage. So red burn decks probably do want this at least in the sideboard. They have, it's tough right now to really replace like Eidolon, or I still think the Swift Spear is better just the haste ability is probably more relevant than the secondary ability, but it's definitely one of those cards in the sideboard that I think is worthwhile just to kill off opposing creatures. Also, this gets around indestructible. That's another thing that is really cool about this, because indestructible takes damage still. Even though they are indestructible, they'll take the damage and get the -1/-1 counters. This is also another way now to kill Gideon. Gideon will get the -1/-1 counters even though he has indestructible and is a 4/4. So if there's any instant speed card that does 4 damage to a creature, for example, then that will kill the new Gideon. And the old Gideon if it can do 5 damage. So, and those -1/-1 counters stick around even after the fact. They try to animate Gideon again, it will still have -1/-1 counters. The same is for manlands that didn't quite die, so think the red-blue land, for example. If you can even throw these on Thing of the Ice, and those counters will stick around when it flips. So I really like this Soulscar Mage. I think it's perfect for what red needs at the moment. Now on to probably one of my favorite cards ever printed so far, but one of my favorite cards ever spoiled. I might just skip the other commander decks that I'm working on right now and focus solely on Hapatra, Vizier of Poisons. This card is so cool because it's in 2 of the decks that I absolutely love it in. Think Lorwyn here. I think think Kitchen Finks. Unfortunately, Kitchen Finks can't go in this particular EDH deck, but other things with persist. And it's the Druid that puts -1/-1 counters on itself. Becomes really cool with this because it's whenever Hapatra, Vizier of Poison deals combat damage, player may put a -1/-1 counter on target creature, and whenever you put 1 or more -1/-1 counters on a creature, create a 1/1 green snake creature token with Death Touch. So it doesn't, if you put more than 1, so Infect cards, for example, work with this. I can't even think what the non-Infect, what was that called back in the day, that did basically what Infect did, but except it didn't do poison damage to players. Anyway, those, if it puts like 3 of it, you'll still only get the 1 snake with Death Touch, but if you have a card that consistently can put -1/-1 counters on it, then you're gonna get a lot of snake tokens with Death Touch, and that's really good. A 1/1 with Death Touch is a huge threat in Standard at the moment for being able to block basically anything on the ground. I'm gonna think this might breathe new life in my black-white or my black-green tokens, because we do have ways to put -1/-1 counters with some of the new tricks that we have out of this deck, like the demon that puts -1/-1 counters on everything when it comes to the battlefield. And Black Sun Zenith, there's another card that works well with this. There is a lot of those cards, even from the Scars of Mirrodin era, put -1/-1 counters on stuff. So this is a very cool card. I'm going to be looking forward to building a commander deck out of it and seeing how well it plays off in the other formats before this with -1/-1 counters. Again, in Modern, I don't know if they'll want this as a target to go get with the Court of Calling, but it does create an infinite loop with the Anafenza and any persist creature. So in this case, Kitchen Finks, yes, you gain unlimited life with the Kitchen Finks Viserys or Anafenza combo to begin with, but this will also give you infinite snake tokens when you'll have 1/1 snake tokens every time the guy persists and then gets a 1/1 counter back on it, and then persists again, gets a 1/1 counter to remove it, persist over and over and over. So, because it does place, yeah, it places a -1/-1, and you control that effect, so that should work. Don't quote me on that, though. So let's go on to Liliana Death's Majesty. This card's okay. Starts off with 5 loyalty for a 5, puts a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield, which is that similar to kind of Gideon's ability, but it's 1 more. And you get a return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature is a black zombie in addition to its other colors. So as soon as Liliana comes back out, it can return a lot of 4-drops like right now that are actually relevant. Would be something like Gaunty or something like Kalidas. Both those are 4-drops, so if they happen to die, then Liliana can come in, and instead of +1ing, she can protect herself by actually generating a more relevant threat. Even like Bristling Hydras at the 4-drop slot. 3-drop has plenty of cards, like if you're in black-white, like Thalia, for example, at this Gisela. Those type of cards that you can, and she'll still be at 2 loyalty, and then you can start pumping her up later on. So this creature does just, or this Planeswalker does just scream value. So it's a well-designed Planeswalker, but I wouldn't hype it up too much right now. It has a lot of ifs for a 5-drop, And we've seen 5-drop Planeswalkers in the past not be too successful unless they're named like 5 or above, unless they're named the old school Gideon and Elspeth are two of them that I can think of in the recent past. But it's I don't know, it's a pretty sweet card in a control deck, or it's just a mid-range deck. So the Jund, I don't think Jund would want this in Modern though, quite. So yeah, I don't think it's quite there. Who knows? It can definitely do some shenanigans, though, in a loot-based strategy, because this can be your Reanimator for 5 mana. I mean, this is basically Rise of the Graves right now is the best we have as far as reanimating something from the graveyard. So if you are in the Cathartic Reunion / Tormenting Voice, it's a reanimating package that can easily get multiple cards over time. After it does use this 1 -3 ability, though, it will take 2 more positives of creating zombies of it to then reanimate again. But card I actually really like this with is probably the vampire, the Eldrazi vampire. When it flips, you can sacrifice creatures and then make your opponent sack creatures. Because in a madness-based strategy, you can dump it in your graveyard earlier than with like the Tormenting Voice or the Cathartic Reunion, and then build up enough black zombies with Liliana, then reanimate it, then force your opponent to sack creatures. So I don't know, it's definitely a cool card. I think it's 5 is probably perfect where it should be. Then another exciting card with Failure and Comply. Return target spell to its owner's hand, so it's very similar to like a Remand type effect, and it gets around cards that cannot be countered. So the card, for example, right now the 3-drop that was spoiled, this can actually bounce it back to the hand when it's trying to be cast. And then the following turn, you can comply and basically name the card. It says choose a card name until your next turn. Your opponent can't cast spells with the chosen name. So, I mean, this really feels like Reflector Mage to me. Reflector Mage, you have to kind of use 2 different turns. So on turn 2 or turn 3, and then your turn 3 or turn 4, you comply it. And it can definitely set back your opponent. So pretty sweet card. It can't bounce something that's already in play, though, and so you have to be reactionary with this. But in a tempo-based shell, like Blue-White Temple, which is what we have right now in the Spirits archetype, this is definitely a card that could affect that, or definitely be something that they'd want. And then you have Spellquellers later on, even on turn 4, for example, to Spellqueller whatever they're trying to cast. So you can really mess up your opponent's curve, and that's why Reflector Mage got banned. It was just a mess for 2 and 3 and 4 drops, and you were put so far behind from what your opponent was doing, and you'd just be locked out. Now is another card that I'm super excited for, the Curator of Mysteries. This seems like a pretty sweet card for Living End type strategies, and the problem with Living End is it hasn't had enough cards to really go into a different strategy. They like the Jund cards because there's 2 Cascade cards, but if you actually go into some other colors, there you get some Cascade cards in the other colors as well. I believe there is a white, is it a white-black or a black-blue Cascade? I'm not quite sure what there's a white-blue enchantment that cascades, but this seems pretty good for a Living End strategy because you're going to be cycling and discarding a lot of cards, and it's to help you scry and find what you need, find your second Living End, or actually just find other things that are relevant past after you've done your first Living End. A lot of Living End decks in this day and age, they try to use Living End very quickly. We're even talking about turn 3, turn 2, turn 2 is very rare with Simian Spirit Guides, but turn 3 is very viable to try to Living End and have like 4 creatures. And if this is one of them, then you can start discarding your other creatures to scry for what you need, other lands or another Cascade for later on. So I do like this card. 4 for flying for 4 mana is not bad. You can cycle it away if you don't want it. It's something that can be reanimated back for Liliana, for example. So you can cycle it early to try to draw into stuff and then just get it back with the reanimation of Liliana. And again, a 4/4 flying can block the Heart of Karan. Doesn't survive, but it can still block it, and it's decently aggressive versus opposing Gideons, and it can block the majority of flying creatures right now that you have to worry about. So definitely a cool card. For standard, well, and then cycling does matter in this. I'm not sure if is there anything that matters with Scry. I'm not quite sure if there is at the moment, but yeah, the Scry is going to be very powerful in the loot-based strategies, and reanimation or loot will probably want Curator of Mysteries. All right, on to Watchful Naga, 3 mana for a 2/2. This is whenever you exert it, you may draw a card, or you may exert Watchful Naga as it attacks. When you do, draw a card. That's not bad. It's a nice filler card, nice 20, 21, 22, 23 pickup for limited because you're going to get value out of it. Yes, it does take an entire turn to untap, but if you can give this vigilance or you have ways to untap your creatures, the Exert does become very, very powerful. Speaking of which, the Glory Bound Initiate is a 3/1. I am already thinking about this in Frontier because there is a warrior that gives other warriors vigilance, and then this becomes a huge beater with a 4/4 every turn. You're attacking in for 4 with lifelink because when you exert it, it gets +1/+3. So that is a sweet little combination. Is it enough to put it over the top? I mean, Frontier Warriors is actually a thing. You'll see them hit the 4-0s, the 5-0s every now and again, and a lot of them don't use the warrior to give them vigilance, but this might actually be enough to do so. So, and it is a human warrior too. If there's anything that gives humans vigilance, for example, or the human strategy still is relevant with Shadows or Innistrad, this could definitely be a great card. To a 3-drop for 3 or 2-drop for 3/1 is fine by itself. So, yeah, really do like this card. All right, the Battlefield Scavenger. When you may exert Battlefield Scavenger's attacks. If you do, discard a card, draw a card. Very good with the looting. Red is looking for a free loot to trigger off Madness. And when the Copter, Smuggler's Copter is banned, it really hurt those type of strategies. This might be able to bring it back, but it's kind of weak compared to the other ones. I mean, just compare it to the. I mean, it is one less than the Naga Wizard, for example, but it's you have to actually discard a card, not just draw a card. But I mean, in decks where that's relevant, this might be a good way. Think vampires here. Other than it isn't a vampire, I think Prize Amalgam decks, it might be pretty decent on turn 3 just to get something in the graveyard. But there's probably better ways at the moment. Manglehorn, 3 mana for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact. You may destroy target artifact. Artifacts your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. Pretty sweet for some of the. It could be tech versus affinity. I don't think it's that relevant versus affinity. Is there any other decks that want? Does Eggs want their artifacts to come back in the battlefield untapped? Yeah, so they can activate them. So yeah, because the Lotus Blooms need to actually tap. So that might actually be a relevant sideboard card. The whole thing is it's actually already fighting with the Reclamation Sage that can destroy an enchantment. And there are some relevant enchantments in Modern. Same thing with Frontier. Reclamation Sage is legal in Frontier, so Manglehorn is just... But the opponent's artifacts entering the battlefield tapped that's a very good effect in Commander for sure. So, pretty sweet card and uncommon too, so you don't have to actually pay for the card. Magma Spray. We've seen this card before. 2 damage start creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it. So now we have Shock and Magma Spray, so you get to pick which one is more relevant. Can't quite hit Prize Amalgam, but it can hit the Scrappy Scrounger. So Scrappy Scrounger does have some more hate. Yay! We like that. So kudos for Magma Spray being back in the format. It will give some of the decks some answers versus the Scrappy Scrounger, which is very, very good at the moment. Throne of the God Pharaoh. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses life equal to the number of tapped creatures you control. Very aggressive. Don't quite see it going into like the traditional affinity, but if you had like a really go wide strategy or create a bunch of tokens type strategy, then I think that Throne of the Pharaoh Gods is pretty good. I wonder if there is some tokens that you can bring in. Like think back in the day, create X/1/1 tokens, exile at the end of turn, and I think you can stack this how you'd want. So then they'd be tapped, they'd done their damage, and they'd get off some more damage. So it's quite aggressive. It's a way to enable the artifact strategy from Kaladesh for sure. And then like Toolcraft Exemplar, for example. So turn 1 Toolcraft Exemplar, turn 2 this, tack in for Toolcraft Exemplar, and then dish off another damage at the end of the turn, and then just this gets better and better as time goes on. But who knows if this is actually going to be enough payoff to... It is loss of life, though, and I guess that is relevant. So, I don't know. Pretty sweet card. Pretty sweet design. And the last but not least is the Regal Caracal. So, other cats you control get +1/+1 and have lifelink, and when it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 white cat tokens with lifelink. Pretty relevant. Usually in the past... These type of cards have seen play, as I'm thinking of the one from Innistrad back in the day. Was it from Innistrad or was it from Ravnica? No, from Ravnica, from Dragon's Maze, that did a similar ability to this. It populated and then left one. And there was one in Innistrad as well. And of course, there's the one in the Kaladesh at the moment that does 2 servos, and then creatures you control get plus almost 1. So very similar to this card. But the 1/1 lifelink is pretty relevant on the cats. It doesn't give itself lifelink, but the other 2 cats, so it's 2, can absorb 4 life and gain you 4 life, which is pretty good for is it better than Linvala though at this moment? Tokens is definitely another viable strategy, and I think this will go in it. So I'll love this in like Teysa Commander for sure, because Teysa does want to gain life a lot of my builds in the white-black, and it does want as many white creatures as possible. And here's another 3 for 1. And then it hooks up, of course, with the most broken EDH combo, which is the Nim's Death Mantle with this. So Ashnod's Altar with Nim's Death Mantle, and this ends up creating infinite mana and infinite tokens, I believe. Yeah, it would do that. So, anywho, get another toy for that. So overall, these have been pretty great spoilers. Of course, Hapatra is probably my favorite spoiled so far out of this entire set, and it looks to be a good set. So kudos to Wizards for the design on this set so far. We'll see how well of a limited environment it is, and see if it actually does affect the standard environment. I'm just still thinking that Kaladesh is so powerful that we really have to have some cards that do a lot to affect the tier 1 and tier 2, or the number 1 number 2 deck at the moment. Anyway, this has been Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching.